menagerie of furry friends that help Simon and Jack find their HEA. Roan, same question. What was your first romance novel?
Yeah, I'm having the same problem that I think my first actual romances had no HEA. So
Oh no.
when I was a child, I was obsessed with, did anyone read the Lurleen McDaniel books?
Oh yeah.
They were not romances because, spoiler alert, everyone dies, but they're these young adult books, everyone, that are featuring they're teenagers. So one teenager had a terminal illness, and then there was the teenager who didn't, and they fell in love, and through the course of the book, it is a romance until the very, very end when whoever has the terminal illness dies. And the epilogue is usually like the person who lived sort of commemorating them in some way, like, you know, they're teenagers, so it's like dedicating a baseball game to them, or having like the letter that they wrote hung on the wall or something. But I was obsessed with them, and I think it's like, even though there was no HEA, it was my first, I don't know, I think it was kind of cool because, you know, young adult books in the 80s, often the romance, it was sort of frivolous or treated as frivolous in the way so much romance is. And these were like, no, this romance is fucking intense because one of you is about to die, and you better pack all that love and all that living into the like 2 months where one of you is a candy striper in the other one's ward, and then it's gone forever, and that's like the love of your life at 15, and go forth, take your SATs or whatever. So I think this was first.
Yeah. Oh man, I think one planted lilies on the football field and they grew 6 months later. It was, yes, intense, absolutely intense.
Not the answers you were looking for, right?
Who'd have thunk?
I know.
Finally, we have Synithia Williams. Synithia Williams has loved romance novels since reading her first one at the age of 13. We're going to get an answer from you. It was only natural that she would one day write her own. When she isn't writing, Synithia works on water quality issues in the Midlands of South Carolina while taking care of her supportive husband and 2 sons. Okay.
Hello.
Give it to us.
I really wish I could remember the name of the first romance novel I read. I read so many back then that I don't remember the name. They had, you know, the card in the middle of the Harlequin books that you rip out and you get 4 books free and subscribe. I did that. So I don't even remember the first one that I read. And then I signed up for the subscription. And there was a flea market close to my house. We call it a jockey lot for anybody else's country as me. And this guy had used books, and you could like fill up a bag for maybe like $1. And so I had tons of just books that I would just inhale. And I've read some really problematic historical ones, but they had sex in them and I loved it. So I just kept reading them. I didn't care how bad they were back then. But yeah, I can't remember the actual first one, but I remember it was a Harlequin. I remember tearing out the card and signing up for the subscription. I probably wasn't supposed to. I think it was supposed to be 18 or older, but they sent them to me. And so I've been reading ever since.
That is all that matters. Gosh, what was my first one? My mother had an entire collection, probably the entire backlog of Jude Devereaux books when I was 12 and 13. So it was definitely one of those that I saw her reading and decided, hey, it must be good, because my mother only read when she really needed to relax. So it probably had time travel in it, because there were a lot of those where it was like someone goes to some other time and then their soulmate meets them in the contemporary period. And that was a big thing then that does not really happen now in romance. It's like, it's not about finding your soulmate, it's about finding the one person or multiple people, with however it works. But so it's really interesting that that was my entry into romance, because now I can't imagine if I picked one up, I'd be like, this is not a romance novel. But they were when I was 13, so. All right. Well, let's do some Q&A. So we're going to do about 20 minutes of Q&A with me, and then we'll take questions that come from our viewers across the world. So those of you watching, definitely ask questions so that we can ask the authors those questions. So I'm going to start with a slow pitch. How about that? Since this is a lunch session, even though I hope you all have eaten, since it's 1 o'clock, I think where everyone is. No, eat after this immediately. What's your favorite food or meal from a romance novel, either that you've written or that you read somewhere else, or in any novel or other kind of book?
I'll jump in. My most recent release, Reunion of Rivals, Quinn Bazemore, my heroine, throws down at one point, and one of the things she makes is peach cobbler, and that is absolutely one of my favorite foods. But all of my books have food in them because I like to eat. And so there's always some cooking and some food going on in every single book.
Awesome.
Yeah, same. I think I can't not write food into books. It's totally my love language personally. So whenever I'm writing, I find that when I want a character to like express that they care for another character, of course they want to make them dinner or dessert or something. And I think my favorite, it's not really a meal. Well, maybe it's a meal. No, it is a meal. In the remaking of Corbin Whale, one of my characters is a baker. And so he bakes things throughout Hala, and bagels and cookies and cakes and everything. But then he throws a Hanukkah dinner, like a kind of neighborhood dinner party, and tries to repurpose kind of like Hanukkah classics like latkes and things like stuff that's fun, but maybe not like you want to use for a dinner party. And so he uses all the classic Hanukkah things to make them into sort of like nouvelle cuisine dishes, and comes up with some pretty cool stuff. Like you often eat latkes with applesauce or sour cream. It's very divisive question. But so he makes a pie that's like a potato crust, like a potato latke crust, and then it's an apple pie inside topped with sour cream, so that you can kind of go both ways, which kind of sounds disgusting actually, but I made it and it's amazing.
All right. I'm probably like the odd chick out because I hate to cook. I'm like the 30-minute meals, fast mom, cooking person. I love to bake. That's why I baked a birthday cake today. I love baking and that. So in my novels, usually I'm at I Google restaurants and see what people eat, and then I just like use that kind of stuff. My folks are eating really simple meals. In my next book, Scandalous Secrets, like the thing that I love to do, I love going to the gas station and getting like the big gulp of soda and getting junk food. So I threw that into the story, that kind of stuff I love. So yeah, if you come to my books for great food descriptions, I'm probably not the best, but I do love reading it when other people do it good and they make me hungry. I think like Farrah Rashan does really great describing food. Delaney Diamond, she does a great job describing food. And I'm like, dang, they must really enjoy cooking, because I don't. I mean, 30 minutes, I don't want to be part of it.
You know what? I love food, but I also don't enjoy cooking, but I really love reading the descriptions of other people cooking, especially in a book that's like, oh, this is unexpected, and we have this whole spread. And yeah, Reese, I really wanted some peach cobbler when I was reading a but alas, I was not going to make it myself.
Yeah.
So
I'll go buy it after I read it, but I probably won't.
Absolutely. So this is a question that I always have for authors, because it's just one of those things where it's like, how do you build things out? And I know that all of you have written both series and standalones. So which one do you find easier, either in the planning or the actual writing, series or a book that's just going to be its own?
I like series. Because I usually start a book and the other characters start speaking to me. So going way back to my very first novel in 2012 was supposed to be a standalone, but then I just realized I had to write the stories for some of the other characters. I'm doing better of like keeping track of the characters as I write the series, because you don't want to forget a key note about them. But I love seeing what happens with the other people in the story.
I don't know that I written a standalone, because my first book, I just wrote that single book, not really intending to make a series. And then one of the characters kind of spoke to me. And that actually taught me to always think in terms of series, because in that book, the character that spoke to me the most, she already had found her man. So I had to go back. That's the only series in which the second book, the events occurred before the events that happened in the first book, because to tell that character story, I had to go back. So after that, I was like, always think series. And so that's pretty much what I do. It is easy anyway, because at this point, I usually write, families or groups of friends and stuff. So.
Yeah, I same. I mean, I like both. I think that what I like about a standalone is even if you can leave yourself little tendrils that could become series, there's something very satisfying about finishing a project and knowing that the entire world is encompassed in that book. And so I do like that. But frankly, most of my things that are standalones, it's because I never wrote the other books in the series. Like I decided that I was just done with that project and moved on to something else. And I love series because I do feel like I love to write groups of friends, and that's been my experience. Is like I live in a neighborhood where all my friends, or many of my friends, live in the neighborhood. Everyone's like problems and successes and romantic shit is just we all know what's going on with each other. And when you go to someone's house, you hear all the gossip about everyone else that's happening. Gossip, invested conversation. And so I love writing a series because I like to lay that little trail of breadcrumbs where it's like there's one conversation in book 1 in the series where they're talking about another friend that you haven't met, and then bam, like book 3, there's that friend and all you knew about them was like something scandalous had happened and you heard about it on one half of a phone call. And I just like, as a reader, I really love that. I love sort of like when you invest in a series and you get a lot out of it by paying good attention. So it feels really exciting to me to get to like play with information in that way, like how it's revealed and when it's revealed.
So with those series, I know that you've all said that like sometimes somebody just speaks to you and you have to write about that person. But when you have that series coming in and you know that it's going to be a series, do you sort of plot out who's going to be next? Because like Synithia and Reese, you both have these like family dynasties happening, and Roan, you've always got these friendships that, like you said, you might hear about them, or they might show up, or they might be complaining about something, or anything could happen, and that could be the next person, or maybe we don't see them for a few more books. So how do you plot that out, or does it just like suddenly come to you as you're writing and you realize this has to be the next person?
Sometimes in a story, it becomes obvious, like who's the next person up. But often when I propose a series, I have an idea of the order in which it's going to come. And so each book, you kind of have an idea who the next person is going to be. Sometimes it's a publishing related decision. Like in my Bourbon Brothers series, having book 2 be the cousin was like, that wasn't something that was originally planned. That wasn't planned as a book in the series at all. It's just that I had an opportunity to do, at the time they did the Billionaires and Babies series. And so I wanted to do a book in that series. I wanted to set it in the same world. And so I used a cousin who was mentioned like maybe in one line in the epilogue of that, first book, ended up having the second book. So generally, yes, I do have an idea every now and then. Some outside forces part of why that decision is made.
Yeah, I'll have an idea because if I do families, it's usually brothers, sisters, or whatever, and I know which order I want to go. The hard part is when I really want to get to one person's book, but I have to write another person in that family before that. And
yes.
So that's the hard part for me. And I'm like, I want to do this person justice. The readers care about this person, but I'm like, I want to skip ahead, but I've already like turned in the proposal. The deadline is for this certain family member. So that happens to me a lot.
Yeah, I found that I sometimes change. I think it's going to be one person, and then it completely changes based on, like, I get to the end of the book that I've been working on, and something catches my attention in writing the last half of the book, and I'm like, oh, actually, I would rather do this other person's book. But yeah, I think for me it depends. When it's traditionally published and you have to tell people, what you're doing. I hear that people like to know what they're paying you to do. Then yeah, I do the same. Like, I think about I don't want two books that might be more similar next to each other and then one that is an outlier. I would rather do one and then the one that's a little more different and then the third or fourth or whatever. And mostly I'm trying to think of, like, which is the best book to end the series on. So if there's one that's like, it sort of feels like the themes that I want to work through with that character are a little bit more conclusionary or summative or something, I want to put that book last because it can kind of feel like a good exit out of the series. Whereas when I'm self-publishing and I know that I can do it in any order, I like no rules, no prisoners. I might change my mind in the middle of writing a book and go write a different book and change the order just because I'm in the mood to.
Yeah, that same. I kind of did the same thing in this series where I did switch which book was the end book because that one brother, it felt like his story was the end story. So yeah, sometimes that happens too.
Yeah,
and that's what a traditionally published series. But my editor is very understanding.
Hooray for editors!
Yes.
Have you ever wanted to go back and rearrange things, even like things that have already been published or things that you could like add a million other stories to? Have you ever wanted to do that? Have you done that at all?
I wish I could have switched the series, my first series, where I wrote the second book. I wrote the first book second. So I wish I had thought that one through and wrote it in a different order. But so yes.
I haven't really wished that I could change too many things, mostly because I really like writing with some parameters. Like, I think it's fun and interesting to have some things that you have to abide by. But I did go back and sort of like retcon my own series when I wrote the three in the middle of somewhere books, and Ginger, who was Daniel's best friend in book one, I wanted to write her story after I had finished those three books, which takes place simultaneously with the first book in the series. So I went back and I wrote it anyway, basically as book 4 in the series, and self-published it, and found myself sort of like having my book open next to me so that I could be like, oh God, what did Ginger already do? Okay, what did she say? God, why on earth did I have her say that? Oh, if she'd just done that, this would have been better. But I had because I was self-publishing it, I was like, oh, that's fine, I'll just do it. And I did actually end up taking something out and retconning it, because I realized that in the first book, in the middle of somewhere, I had this one line, a kind of throwaway line that I wrote, not thinking that I would write her a series, where she had a gay brother who killed himself as part of her backstory. And it was, I put it in because I had thought I was going to do something else with it, and then never did, with her backstory, and never did. And then when I went to write her book, it was a couple of years later, and it wasn't my first book anymore. And I was like, I don't need any more bury your gays. So I just retconned it. I just took it out as if it had never happened. And when I self-published the Middle of Somewhere series, I took it out and in the Middle of Somewhere too, and felt fine about doing that, because who needs that,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that is a great segue into my next question, which is a little more complicated and might actually be easier. I don't know. So you all write about groups of people that have really interesting balances of privilege and marginalizations, wealthy Black family dynasties, people who are white, but also varying levels of queer, who have different mental health issues and all of that. How do you work through that when you're writing and making sure that you as authors and we as readers can still stay in that happy place that romance is for all of us?
Yeah.
I hate to keep going first. I don't want to feel. I don't want you to think I keep going jumping in. I just don't want to leave a blank space. So I'm happy to jump in, but somebody else, please.
Jump in. Go, Reese. Go.
Yeah, go,
Okay.
Reese.
Well, for me, I don't, especially in the beginning, I didn't really think about it a lot. You know, I do write wealthy families and stuff. And honestly, that's for me more because it is a focus of the line that I write for. For me, I don't focus on the fact that they have that wealth. I feel those requirements, but it's not about that for me. It's about who they are as people, their relationship with their friends and family, you know, the journey that they go on. So that really wasn't a focus for me. Because of, I would say, I have noticed in the last few books I've written, I think my mindset is probably a little bit different. And so I am starting to address some of those issues a little bit, but you know, so I hit it, state it like a fact, they address the issue and then they move on. So it's not like a downer or anything, but these are the facts. Them's the facts, okay? So basically I just kind of address it that way. And honestly, there are times when I always wonder if my editor's going to let it stand. And, you know, I was really glad, for instance, this December book that's coming out of mine, there are some conversations in there about things that, you know, Black people have to deal with in the workplace and stuff. And so those issues are talked about plainly, but it's not like a downer in the book. It's just, that's the way it is. Here's how we handle it. And, you know, so that's how I handle it. And I'm writing one right now that I'm going to see how much they're going to let me keep. So we'll see.
And so my first series with Harlequin, they were like celebrities, you know, that's how they got their wealth. And then I did the basketball series, and again, that's how they got their wealth. But I'll take stories that I'll actually hear in real life and throw it in a book. So I think it was Overtime for Love, where the heroine was talking to the hero's grandmother, and she was talking about how her dad worked hard. He was trying to get a paycheck from the place he worked, and then, you know, he was attacked for asking for his money as a Black man from the white boss. And that was a true story that came from, you know, somebody in my family. So I may throw stuff like that in, things that I've actually heard, things that I know that have actually happened to people, and I just put it as part of backstory for some of the other characters. Not, to me, I don't think I'm doing it to prove a point or anything, but just to show that that is that part of history that a lot of people have. And with my new series, with the Jackson Falls series, I wanted to write this big dynasty, like, you know, rich family. But I also put in there that they built their dynasty by purchasing the tobacco farm where their family was originally sharecroppers. Like, they originally couldn't, you know, they sharecropped that land, and then they were able to purchase it back and turn this into this huge multi-million-dollar company that's where their wealth came from. And hence of their pride, you know, even though they have the, you know, the soap opera-ish stuff in the story, their pride comes from the fact that, you know, they turned their family legacy around by taking that sharecropping history and made this new legacy now. So I've always, if I go back and look at even some of my earlier books, I throw stuff like that in there, just to show that it's just an everyday fact for a lot of people. That's just their history.
I think that one of the things that I've thought a lot about in the since I started writing 5 years ago to the present is like, I'm queer and I'm a queer author who writes queer characters, but also most of my books are about cis men. And it's something that is talked about a lot. You know, there's a million Twitter conversations about it. And so like, queer representation is supremely important to me. But I also have just thought a lot about personally what is required of me to write the kinds of books that I want to write. And one thing that I think is really interesting is that when I'm writing men, just because of, you know, patriarchy, there's a certain freedom that I feel that I'm embarrassed about. Like, I'm embarrassed that I feel freer to write cis male characters than cis female characters, but it's true. And it's something that I've sort of had to reckon with for myself, is like, why is it that I feel freer to write certain kinds of characters when they're men? And there's this way that I think queerness functions in romance where there's a blankness that readers can bring to particularly like a white male character, a lack of assumptions that they can bring to those characters that makes me feel like I can write whatever I want. And I think that's not the way I want things to be, but I think that that's the way I feel they are often. And when I sit down to write something, there's a way that it feels easier to write something that I know can function as a blank canvas because of patriarchy, because of white supremacy. And that's something that I now in 2020, I'm kind of like, yeah, I gotta challenge myself to try to do a lot better and like lean into the difficulty of writing characters that aren't that way. And I found that when I was writing Small Change, which is about a queer woman dating a cis man, I found it so much harder. I found it so much harder to write a character who was dealing with like a kind of sexism and misogyny, even though I'm a woman, like I know that sexism, I know that misogyny, I live it every day. And so I thought a lot about like, why was it so much harder for me to write that book and deal with the fact that when I got to the end of the book, she was supposed to get her happily ever after, and she did. And I'm so happy with her happily ever after. But there's this way that like a happily ever after for two white men seemed like it might actually overwrite other things in the world that were not happily ever after. Whereas a happily ever after for my female character, I felt so much like there were all these other things that it didn't overwrite. Like it was a happily ever after for her in her relationship that did not overwrite any of the other shitty things that were in the world. And yeah, so that, sorry, I think that maybe I've strayed from your question, but it's just been like a point of reflection for me recently, like trying to dig deep into a balance between like maybe just like feeling easy writing things that I want to write that are escapist for me, that feel fun for me, and then facing the fact that the reason that those things feel easier for me or feel fun for me are because of being a product of a super fucked up society, and like wanting to do some work so that I can dig in and write harder stories and find a way to like bring joy through those stories that are more difficult for me to write personally.
Awesome. That's a write harder stories, I think is going to be your memoir title.
Yeah, I would love that to be my memoir title.
I like it.
Yeah. So that was a lot of hard thinking for all of us. So I have a fun question. What's a trope that you haven't yet written that you would love to write?
Okay, I have two answers for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Two answers for that. The first one is Marriage of Convenience, which I am actually writing now. And that was because I've never done one before. But then one I love and I'm obsessed with is I love Forced Proximity, One Bed, and I've never written one of those. So I really, really want to write one of those stories.
Yeah. Trope is probably hard. Marriage of Convenience. Yeah, I was actually literally just thinking that the other day, like, how do I write? Because again, I said before the thing started, I'm watching K-dramas and, Marriage of Convenience. And I'm like, how do I make that work? In the contemporary, why would they get married if they don't have to in 2020? But it would be cool to be able to figure that out. So let's brainstorm, Reese. I would, but there's some genres, like I would love to write like a fantasy sci-fi type romance one day. That's just like, that's my big bodacious book idea. When you guys hear me tweet about that, is this idea for this huge fantasy kind of romance thing. Then I've written one chapter, not wrote, but so I would love to do that one day and, figure out Marriage of Convenience in 2020.
I would love to do a kind of second chance romance, friends to lovers kind of thing. And I would love to do an enemies to lovers. I can't say I've never done it because I wrote my novella Natural Enemies. I pretend that it's an enemies to lovers, like I promo it that way, but in actuality they're enemies for like 5 minutes and then like each other. And I think when I don't like someone, all I want is to get away from them. I am not attracted to them. I don't think they're hot. I don't want to spend any time or energy with them. I just want to be like, get away from me. And so when I tried to write enemies to lovers, I just failed utterly and had to make them like each other really, really soon. But I would love to write like a true enemies, like enemies to lovers.
Well, I hope you all figure those out because I want to read them. And I'm looking forward to that Marriage of Convenience book.
Coming in 2021.
Coming in 2021. All right. You heard it here, folks. Okay, and so one more question before we go into Q&A from the audience at large. And this could be easy, or if you're like me and your mind goes blank when you hear this question, I'm sorry. What are you reading right now, or what have you read recently that you'd recommend others check out?
So I cheated, and because we were chatting about this before, I pulled up mine on my phone so I couldn't forget it. But I'm just reading one. I don't know if you can see.
May Peterson?
Yeah, May Peterson's Sacred Dark series. The second one was released, I think, last week-ish. It's an amazing fantasy series, and the world building is so cool, and the writing is beautiful, and it's like a very different kind of fantasy romance. And so since we were talking about sci-fi fantasy romance as well, I feel like that's definitely my recommendation in romance. And I will just give a plug because I know that I read in lots of genres, and I know that this is not romance exactly, but if any of you out there also want recommendations for other things, I've been on a kind of horror suspense kick lately, and I just read all of Riley Sager's books. He wrote Final Girls, I think is his most famous one, which is a play on the trope of the final girl in a horror movie, like the one person who lives. But he has, I think, 4 books out. The most recent one is a haunted house mystery that was kind of like The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, if you're interested. So Riley Sager is my non-romance rec.
Cool. All right. I'm totally cheating too because I remember the title and I did not want to screw up the author, but I'm actually listening to an audiobook. It's a cozy mystery called Inside Deadly Scoop by Abby Collette. Because audio is just kind of the way I've been doing for the past 2 years in order to get through books. Because I said I wanted to read outside of the romance genre more, and when I saw the cover, it's like the ice cream scoop and it looks like a skeleton with sprinkles on the scoop. I was like, I want to try that out, and I'm really enjoying it. So that's what I'm currently listening to / reading, and I would recommend it if people like cozy mysteries to check it out.
Currently reading, I tend to read more than one book at a time because I'm always writing and I just dig in whenever I can. So I am reading Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert, and loving it. And also I just started listening to yesterday, and I don't remember the author's name, but everybody else is going to know it because I'm like probably the last person in the world to read this book. Is On Dublin Street. I've had it forever. And for some reason, I just started listening to it yesterday. And in terms of a book to recommend, a book I've been recommending so much from reading earlier this year is Lush Money by Angelina M. Lopez. She just came out with Hate Crush, which I can't wait to read, but I love Lush Money so hard. So I'll rec that book wherever I go.
That's on my list. So yeah, I really want to read that one.
Love it, and it's hot. And I read I listened to the audiobook the first time back when gyms were still open. I was on the treadmill listening to it, and it was amazing. The narrator is great.
Ooh, audio even better.
Great. So much melodrama. So great.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to start asking you all questions that have come to me in various ways. The first one, sorry if you once again go completely blank, is from Essie. And it's, do you have a favorite romance series?
Oh, the Side Changeling series by Nalini Singh. I love that series. Like, hands down, one of my favorites. can't wait for the next book. Devoured every single book in that series. So love and the Guild Hunters, both of them, just like both of those series. Love them. You can't tell. I love them. Caleb Krychek forever.
Ooh, I think I would say I love the Psy-Cop series by Jordan Castillo-Price. Ongoing series. There are like 1 million books in it now. They're all amazing. It's like a contemporary urban magic, dead, what do you call it, mediums mysteries. Very awesome. I also love Josh Lanyon's mystery series, so the Holmes and Moriarty series, oh my gosh, and the Adrian English series. And in terms of contemporary romance, probably my favorite series is the Misfits series by Garrett Lee.
I cannot pick a single series, so I'm gonna pass on that one. I refuse to do it.
All of the books. Just read all of them. Okay, this one is from Dominique. Tell us about the first time you saw your book in a bookstore, if you have, and which book was it?
That was it was actually my first Harlequin, A New York Kind of Love, which is totally Idris Elba fiction. It's huge famous. That's what I wrote, and I saw it in a Kmart in Florence, South Carolina, and I squealed and I took a picture, and I think I posted it, so you can probably find it in some, go down an internet rabbit hole. But it was just really awesome. It was really cool to see it. I'm just in Kmart visiting my in-laws, and bam, there's my book. So.
I don't think I ever got to see one of my Kamani books on the shelf because I live in an area where let's just say we don't have a lot of the Walmarts, they have like the African-American book section. We don't have that here. It's it's not quite the sticks, it's the suburbs, but it's zone rural or whatever. So yeah, so I didn't see any of those. They didn't have any of those at my local like Walmarts and stuff, so I didn't see any of those. I think the first one I might have seen on the shelf was Savannah Secrets, when that came out with Harlequin Desire. I saw it at a Walmart, and that was pretty freaking awesome. So
I don't think I've seen one in person. I saw someone who worked at a Barnes and Noble sent me a picture of, they did like I think Pride Month display of queer books, and they had ordered some of mine for the display, but maybe fingers crossed we'll see better than people in a bookstore or someday. I think I would probably like lose my shit, take a picture, tell everyone, be a nerd, call my mom, usual.
FaceTime.
Yeah, exactly. Be like.
So this one is from Kamala. I've also been doing a lot of rereading these past few months as I'm having a harder time getting to new books. Are you having similar issues with writing in these times?
Yes, I had a very difficult time, especially when the quarantine first started, especially when we were seeing these crazy high numbers of people dying of COVID. I was mentally just frozen. And so I would say for that first 2 months, I just did a lot of reading and binge watching shows like Schitt's Creek. But I just couldn't write. And even now it's not as easier. Let me say, it feels like it's harder than it used to be. So it's something that I'm working on, but it is definitely better than it was in those first couple of months.
Yeah, I came into 2020 kind of on a writing slump. I don't know what was going on, but I was just having this whole, why am I writing? What is the point of this kind of moment that I think we all go through? And so I went to a writer's retreat, which helped, but it was like as soon as I got back from that retreat, boom, COVID quarantine. And I still had to work from home, and my kids were schooling from home. And so it was just trickles of words, and it's still kind of that way. I hit the groove, put the headphones on, play the music, and I can kind of get into it. And I've set up regular Zoom sprints with a couple of writer friends on Monday nights, and that's helped. But the words aren't flowing as much as they were in 2018, 2019.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I wrote the first draft of my most recent book completely while we were in quarantine, and I think it was definitely harder than usual, and I found that I was writing more to word count than I usually did. So I was sort of like key smashing to try to get to a word count so I could tell myself I got my word count and feel good about that, to have like one thing to feel good about. And when I went back and read the draft, it was very disjointed, and I could really tell that it wasn't written like in a flow. It was written in a sort of like desperate, like stop and go traffic kind of. You're like, just got to get over one lane and one car length ahead, and like you're not actually making progress or going anywhere. You're just like that. But yeah, I've been working on some other a secret non-romance project, which I will announce at some point. But that actually has helped me the most, is writing something that wasn't romance, because it felt a little bit less like, romance is my job and I adore it, but there is always in the back of my mind that like, if you don't finish a book, you won't be able to pay rent and like get food or whatever. And writing something that wasn't romance and totally was detached from any kind of like professionalism felt a little more fun, a little less pressureful, and that's helped a lot.
Okay, so we've got a few other questions, but are running low on time. So I am going to pick one at random and then leave the questions for the panelists to answer on Twitter or in some other way, so that anyone who asks them can definitely like get an answer. How's that sound?
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so at random. Well, this is great to end on. Which book is a favorite each author has written, and why is it your favorite?
Anybody jump in.
It's just, picking your favorite child. It's all right.
Yeah, no big deal. That's cool. Tell all the rest of the books.
Right now I'm going to say Candle Yours, which is an indie project I did. It is a older woman, younger man, and he is her younger brother's former best friend. So, and then they get to travel all over the world in the Caribbean, in the carnival culture. That's that's my favorite one right now, but it's one of three. So I'm just going to say that one.
Yeah, I think again, whatever, picking things. I think maybe one of my favorite books I've written is Rend, which is the second in the Riven series. It's an already married romance, the only one that I've written, and it starts with a couple who are in a wonderful marriage and love each other a lot, and then one of them has to leave to go on tour. He's a musician, and in his absence, Matt, his partner, starts descending into this kind of depression and anxiety, and realizes that like he doesn't know how to be in a relationship, and without his partner there, he suddenly kind of falls apart and spirals. And so it's about him a year after they've gotten married, like having to start all over again. They have to start all over again and rebuild their relationship, and reckon with the fact that they kind of got married in a whirlwind before they knew certain things about each other. And it's I really enjoyed writing it, partly because I think it's something that I don't see very often. Like an already married story is something I don't see that often, but even when I do see it, it's usually like some real drama happens, like someone cheats or someone has a terminal illness or something, and they come back from it. And I was really interested in writing a story that was like, what if sometimes you just wake up one morning and you realize that you're in a life that you never thought you would live, and you like don't fucking know what to do, and how do you deal with that? So I think that's one of my favorites. So that's Rend, which is the second in the Riven series.
I would probably say Guarding His Heart was one of my Kamanis. I really enjoy writing that one because it's blended families. He has kids by two different women, from an ex-wife and a girlfriend, and I just wanted to show a different side of a Black man who has multiple kids, but he cares about his family. He wants to keep the family together, even though the relationships may not have worked out, and he still wants to pursue and make things work with a new relationship. So I really enjoyed writing that one, and I wanted to try to portray that in a positive light. With the current series, my Jackson Falls series, I'm really enjoying Elena's book. I know a lot of people think she's a bitch, and yeah, she kind of is, but I am too sometimes. And and these people, everyone's saying, "Oh, we want unlikable heroines." Well, okay, let me know. Be ready when her book comes out next year. Yeah, she's not the nicest person, but she falls in love. Everybody deserves to, be happy. And so I'm hoping that people will appreciate her story.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm excited. Well, thank you all for all of your answers, and I will get the remaining questions that weren't answered to you, and you can answer them in whatever way you find easiest. Thanks to everyone who is still watching and came out and is watching later. Please remember to visit bookstoreromanceday.org to support your local indie, see what else is happening today, and check out what might have happened recently. And make sure to follow Book Clubbish and Harlequin on all of the socials. And also remember that if you purchase a book from your indie bookstore from any of the panelists on the Harlequin group, then you can get a free ebook out of an option of, I believe, 7. And you can find all of that out on the Bookstore Romance Day page. So once again, thanks to everyone. Thank you to you three. You are awesome folks, and I really enjoyed talking to you. And enjoy the rest of Bookstore Romance Day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jessica.